Hey everybody, this is Dr. Flight. I hope you're doing great today. I wanted to spend a little time talking about products. This is a big area in marketing, thinking about what our product is going to be, which represents our value proposition. And so this video will introduce you to the idea of different types of products. We're going to spend a lot of time just defining and characterizing what products are, kind of the dimensions that they have, and how we can organize them a little bit. So to get started, we'll spend a little time, and maybe it's a little theoretical, but when we build a product, there are different areas that create value, I guess, and different ways we can think of where value is delivered as a result of the product. Product specific. So there are going to be three sort of dimensions or levels that you can think of in creating a product. The first product would be the core product. Core product deals with what the customer's core need is that's being satisfied. So in other words, whatever the need is, that's what the product does. That's what it satisfies, and that's the core product. Beyond that, there's something called the actual product, and it's the physical product. It includes the actual physical pieces of the product, if you will. This could be a service too, but it's like the name, the level of quality that's delivered, packaging, the materials that are used, those types of things. And oftentimes we say, well, we buy those actual products. We buy something tangible, or we buy a service and we see those results. And that's something tangible that we see, or that's something that we observe as a result of buying the product. So we'll see a lot of variations in products on this level, but ultimately, all the variations, however many they may be, they still produce the same core product. They still satisfy the same need. So a lot of differentiation happens at the actual product level. The third level is called the augmented level, or the associated services level. This level is where we add benefits that help the customer use or purchase the product. So think about it that way. So if we add a warranty, if we give some type of service plan or educational component, or if we offer credit so that the customer can buy the product sooner and then pay us back. Those are all services and add-on features that help the customer use the product or access the product more readily. Those are associated services. And so think about, like, if you're creating a new product, first we have to satisfy the core need. And it's what the product, its purpose is. Then we can add different features. We can use different materials. We can do color schemes. We can do different packaging. And then we can add services on top of that to enhance the value of the product. And so we compete against all the other competitors out there on these three different levels, or at least on the actual level and on the associated services level. So kind of conceptualize that and make sure you're comfortable with those three kind of elements. Now, I've mentioned this idea of a service a couple times. A service is a special category of product. So we're going to look at some different ways we can think about, like, distinguishing a service from a tangible good or a product. And it's oftentimes this idea of this physical nature, this idea that you can hold it. There are going to be some other characteristics that are there too, but think about services as acts, efforts, performances. It could be when you do something for somebody else, but they don't actually own that something that is done. It's something that is performed for somebody else. Another way we can think about this, and going back to this idea of having multiple dimensions in a product, we can think of something what's called a good service continuum. A goods service continuum. And this idea that products actually can have bits of tangible elements and bits of service all together in them. So they can have a physical product, the actual product, but they can also have those associated products as well, or features also inside that product there too. So here's an image of, or a description of this idea, this goods services continuum, where some things we buy are completely pure product. They satisfy a core need. There's very little differentiation between competitors. There are virtually no associated goods. We have things like commodities like salt, flour, sugar. Those are in the grocery space. Gasoline, to a great extent, is a commodity, which, you buy your gasoline from any number of gas stations, but you're buying virtually the same thing. On the other end of the spectrum, you have all services, which are very subjective. They're very dependent on the customer. Customer is very customized. And then in the middle, you have sort of this blend where you buy a product, like at a restaurant, you buy a product, you buy the actual food, but you're also buying the quality, whether it's delivered on time, whether the person smiles or not, the service of it, whether you had a good experience, the atmosphere of the restaurant. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things that go into what you would consider a good experience at a restaurant that aren't just the actual food. It's a blend of the two. Okay, so think about that as you kind of think about product development, defining a product. What is a product? What makes a product good? And this is all part of the value generation process, where we create value for the customer by doing all of these different elements or layers that are associated with the product itself. Okay, so let's go into this a little bit more, describing products, describing services, different categorizations of this. One thing we can talk about is categorizing products based on their usefulness in time and how long they last. A durable good is a product that you buy every once in a while, and it lasts, and you use it over and over and over and over again before you have to buy a new one. Okay, so this is usually a big expense, an expensive type of a purchase, something that you don't buy that often, but it lasts for a very long time. I suppose it doesn't have to be an expensive thing, but it's something that you make a decision on, and then you might use it for years before you have to buy a new one and make that decision again. Second category would be non-durable goods. Non-durable goods are ones that are used up on a regular basis, which means that they're consumed or they're used and they have to be replaced on a fairly regular basis. So repeat purchase items, ones where you remember your purchase better because it's a more frequent purchase. They might eventually be products that are routine products you buy on a regular basis, so you're not really doing a lot of decision making, like the process for decision making probably isn't like as big of a deal on a non-durable good, whereas it is for a durable good. Okay, so a couple ideas there. Going back to this idea of services though, let's talk about some unique features that services have. One, we already talked about, this idea of tangibility. So when we talk about a service, it's typically something we can't hold. Or we can't possess so much in a physical sense. It's intangible. Also, though, we have a dimension called perishability, where the product doesn't last. The effects of the product don't diminish over time, and they don't last over time. It's perishable. It's short-lived. Inseparability. Now, this one you might not have ever heard of before. Inseparability is a trait where the person who's providing the service and the service itself are one and the same thing. You can't separate the provider from the service. Think of it this way. Maybe you have a special barber or a hair salon or a somebody who's gonna do your hair, and that person does your hair in a very special way. And only that person does it. So you go back to that person over and over and over and over again because that person has a very special talent, maybe a unique way of cutting hair or styling hair, And if you went to a different person, you'd get a different result. You'd get a different haircut or a different style or a different look, because only that first person can really deliver what you're expecting. And so in other words, the service that's being delivered can't be separated from the person delivering the service. That's the concept of inseparability. The last one's going to be variability, and this is actually a big one in business and in sales. One of the things we want to do is have a consistent product. That's something we always want to strive for. Being able to deliver consistency in our products, the way it performs, the way it behaves, the way it delivers value. In services, there's a lot of variability because one person may deliver a service one way, and another person may deliver the same service in a different way, and the result could lead in a difference in quality or a difference in actual value that the customer sees. That's called variability. When there's a variance or there's a difference in delivery quality, that's a concern, and there's actually a bunch of analyses called gap analysis that's done specifically for measuring this trait. Okay? All right, so we learned a little bit about different layers of the product, this idea of a goods continuum with services. We learned a little bit about durable, non-durable goods, services. Moving back to this tangible good idea, we have a classification of products that happens. And so this is definitions and classifications. So you're going to hear these terms a lot, both on the consumer side and also on the business side. So looking at the consumer side first, there are 4 different types of classes or product classes. And one which we'll talk about is convenience products. Convenience products are products that are typically non-durable. They're products that are purchased frequently, and they typically require a very small amount or little amount of thinking when you're in the decision-making process. Think convenience goods stores, think the impulse items at a cash register that are close to you. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about those purchases, but they're purchases that are made very quickly. Products in this category tend to be very simple, just by design. When we move to shopping products, that changes quite a bit. A shopping product is a product where you put a lot more effort and thought into buying the good. Maybe a tangible good where you have 2 or 3 options and you're deciding between those options. When you go to buy a TV, you usually look at a couple different varieties before you buy one. When you go to buy a car, you certainly do. You put a lot more effort into that process. You shop around for the product that would make the most sense. So it refers to really the process of shopping, and it's much more involved with a shopping good than you think of for a convenience good. Okay. Another category would be a specialty good. Specialty products are products that are very unique in the sense that as a customer, you seek them out specifically. They're usually niche products that are unique, that maybe have special features that you seek out specifically to have. Or maybe they're in a category that is in a special space. So maybe you want a special bouquet of flowers, so you go to a florist that specializes in flowers, and that florist can give you tons of information on the different colors and scents and styles and the meaning behind the flowers and the arrangement and what pairs well with them and how it's going to be arranged and what vase would look nice in it. And they give you a lot of that detail that you really want because it's a really special thing, right? It has a lot of information. And one of the key things here is as a consumer, you'll specifically seek out a specialty good. And oftentimes you're very loyal and very focused on that one product. And you oftentimes don't look at a lot of other options because you know exactly what you're looking for. in a specialty good. So you'll search them out. The last category is a real oddball category, and it's one we don't see all the time, not very often. It's a product that exists. However, the need identification is not clear. So remember, in the decision-making process, the consumer goes through 5 different steps, and the first step is need identification. An unsought product is a product where that need is not clearly identified or known, and the customer has to find it or realize it. So one of the examples that is often referred to in this space would be like certain types of insurances, like insurance for health or insurance for you lose your job and you have insurance to protect you if you have medical bills. You have insurance that you might not otherwise think you need. You might not know you need it. You might not look for it. So somebody has to kind of bring that awareness to you, and that's what unsought products do. You have to let people know or communicate to them that they have the need, because otherwise they don't realize they have the need, and then you can sell them the product, and then they can buy the product. So an unsought product is one that the customers wouldn't naturally seek after. A lot harder to sell, of course. And customers don't always want to buy these things, but that's what an unsought product is. That's why we don't see it very often, I guess. That's probably what it is. All right, shifting over to the business side of things, we have 5 different classifications of business products. So we'll run through these pretty quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So equipment is just as it sounds. It's the equipment that's used to operate or function in an operational sense for the business. It's typically machines or pieces of a process that are used every day in the operation of the business. MROs, you'll sometimes hear that term, MROs, stand for maintenance, repair, and operating. And so MROs, maintenance, repair, and operating goods, are goods that are used in the operations process. So if I'm building something or I'm fabricating something or assembling, I have certain raw materials or certain things that I use to keep my equipment running and keep the process running, and I consume them, and I have to buy them on a regular basis to make sure everything runs well. Those are MROs. Okay, raw materials are, again, just as it sounds, materials that have not been fabricated or not been modified in any way. So raw materials could be things like certain types of steel or metals. They could be plastics. They could be minerals. They could be any number of things that come from nature. Or have been produced or mined or put together without modification. That's kind of the key thing here. Lumber, agricultural products, corn, wheat. If it comes straight from the field and you get a bushel of corn, that nothing has been done to it yet, so it's in its raw state. I guess that's a good way. Sugar, another good example of a raw material. Okay, so those are the first 3. Next to processed materials. Okay, so let's take a raw material and do something to it, and then sell it to another business. Once we do something to that raw material, it's been processed. So a processed material is just that. It's something I'm going to use in my operation. It's going to be something I use in my product, but it's not in its raw form. It's already been manipulated somehow to meet my specifications that I need in order for the product to be used in my processes. The last category, component parts. This is when we have a piece of my product that's been produced by somebody else. I buy that piece and then I insert it into my product that I'm going to sell to somebody else. Think about like an auto dealer or auto manufacturer, car manufacturer. Car manufacturers don't make radios. They buy the radio already made, and then they install it into the car, which they then sell to us. So they're assembling a car, they're putting together a car, they're building a car, but most of the pieces of the car have been produced by somebody else. They're just assembling it. Okay, so that's what a component part is. It's a piece that's already been manufactured, it's all been produced, and we're inserting it into our product in order to make value, right? All right, so there's 5 different business product categories, 4 different customer categories. Here's the wrap up. We want to wrap this up. Remember, look at these items as items that would be good for studying, for tests. Explain the 3 components of the product, the core, the actual, and the associated products, or the augmented product. That's another term that's used there. Define durable, non-durable good. Describe the different characteristics of a service. Remember, intangibility, perishability, inseparability, and variability, right? Remember those. Describe the 4 types of consumer products, and then finally the 5 types of business-related products. Okay, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, this is just an introduction to products, and it's just a set of definitions and categories that we use when we think about product design. All right, let me know if you have any questions.